You have that, right?
Yep. Good. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Tuesday, March 9th. This is a meeting of the Municipal Operations and Public Safety Committee. My name is Mike Breen. I'm the chairman. We have the full committee here today. Do we have Councilman Cater? President Cater? Okay, we don't. We have Councilwoman Shanae Williams, Councilwoman Dasha Diaz, Councilman John Rubo. In attendance is the Majority Leader, Corazon Pineda Isaac, and Councilman Anthony Moranti. The first topic is the resolution to adopt the City of Yonkers Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative Plan. This needs to be wrapped up by the end of the month. It's of time of essence because it has to be in Albany. We also have a resolution about the Columbus Day holiday and having it remain in the state of New York as a holiday. With that, I'm going to introduce the chairman of the Police Reform and Reinvention Collaboration Plan, Carlos Moran. Thank you for attending. And we have Deputy Chief Campanini and Police Commissioner John Mueller. And with that, I'm going to ask Commissioner Mueller if he would like to give us a synopsis of the committee report.
So just to give everybody an idea, what's that?
Did you mean Commissioner Moran or?
Yeah, it would be Commissioner Moran for that because you were the chairman, right, Carlos?
Right. Is that what you wanted, Councilman?
Mute it, Mike. You're muted, Chairman.
There we go. It's because I might say something. Carlos, Chairman Moran, if you would give us a committee report, and then we'll hear from the police commissioner.
Sure. Good afternoon, City Council members. My name is Carlos Moran. I was asked by Mayor Spano to chair the Yonkers Police Reform Collaborative Committee and to carry out the reform mandated as set by New York State Executive Order 203, also known as the New York State Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative. Executive Order 203 required each local government in New York State to adopt a police reform plan that maintain public safety and build mutual trust and respect between police and the communities they serve. Working in collaboration with the members of the City of Yonkers Police Department, the committee carefully and methodically considered 4 key sections of the police reform mandate. 1, what functions should the police reform? 2, employing smart and effective policing standards and strategies. 3, fostering community-oriented leadership, culture, and accountability. 4, recruiting and supporting excellent personnel. Since October 2020, the following was accomplished. The City of Yonkers created and convened community stakeholders through the Yonkers Police Reform Collaborative Committee. This committee is comprised of 25 key stakeholders. These stakeholders are community members, nonprofit and faith-based leaders, YPD members, district attorney's office, and local elected officials. From the age of 19 to the age of 70 and over, the committee members varied in age and in composition, racial composition. The committee was tasked with initiating a fact-based and open dialogue about the city's public safety needs and also with developing a plan that reflects the community's vision for the role of the Yonkers Police Department in meeting those needs. In addition to the committee members, there were 5 other members providing important support to the process. 1 professional facilitator, 1 stenographer taking notes and creating minute transcripts, 3 volunteer City of Yonkers employees who provided necessary and important support, such as organizing meeting venue, email communication, and other logistics. Each key section was discussed and debated at our weekly meeting. For each section, the Yonkers Police Department provided the committee with information and data on the current state of the department, which included operations, policies, and procedures relative to the topic. Nothing was held back. It was an open, fact-based, and honest. There were 14 committee meetings from October to January 2021. We used a combination of live in-person meetings at the Riverside Library and Zoom meetings as COVID-19 issues surged. We also had 2 public forums for input on police relations, one at the Riverside Library and one at the Will Library. The meetings were also broadcast through social media. 150 community members attended the meetings in person, and close to 7,000 viewers were counted on Facebook Live feed. From the public meetings, we obtained over 200 comments, with majority expressing a positive view of Yonkers policing. At present, we have completed the public and committee review and discussion on policing and have created a reform plan document that will be given or was given to the council. In summary, the committee found that as a result of dozens of police reform measures already implemented by the City of Yonkers as part of the 2016 City of Yonkers and Department of Justice Agreement and changes made by the present commissioner and prior commissioner, the city was ahead of the curve in addressing many of the issues identified by the governor's executive order and guidance and by the Yonkers Reform Committee. However, the committee has proposed 22 recommendations aimed at continuing to improve the efficiency of response to service calls and building trust between police and the community it serves. The 22 recommendations are focused within 8 critical areas: addressing mental health, substance abuse, and homeless calls, improving communication between caller, dispatch, and police, law enforcement presence in schools, procedural justice and community and police policing strategies, address bias-based stops, searches, and arrests, citizen oversight, accountability, and transparency, recruiting a diverse workforce, mental health support for police. The plan was up for public review and comment until yesterday, March 8th, 2021. As a final note, after this process is completed and plan is ratified, the Yonkers Reform Committee will continue to be a viable and active committee tasked with reviewing plan progress and establishing measures to review the progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moran, and please give my compliments to the committee of 25. That's quite a committee to get a lot of work done with, and we appreciate it. Next up is Commissioner Mueller, and just want to say the Yonkers police are ahead of the curve. A lot of this stuff has been addressed, and to be totally transparent, I do have two of my children on the police force, so I do have my view of
Focus areas.
And with that, I want to introduce our police commissioner, John Mueller, for his thoughts. Thank you. You need to unmute, Commissioner.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here today to speak before the council and to the residents of Yonkers. This was a long process that had to happen. We were very happy to have the open communication. I think we learned a lot in the police department. I know we did. And I hope that people on the committee learned a little bit about the Yonkers Police Department. As you said before, we had implemented a lot of these changes, and it was not, by choice initially. We entered into an agreement with the Department of Justice when they started to investigate the Yonkers Police Department in 2007. And we have been working towards being in substantial compliance with that the entire time. And I will say, at the time that DOJ came, I didn't think it was good. I didn't think it was fair. I will tell you now categorically that it was the best thing that ever happened to the Yonkers Police Department. We never could have had the kind of transformational change that we've experienced without having the Department of Justice there as a partner. Don't always agree, but it's really good for police departments. I kind of use the example of even Tom Brady has a quarterback coach. So even the best, as good as you want to be, to have someone take a look from you outside of yourself is really, really helpful. And I think that the Police Reform Committee is an extension of that. I did not want to be on the committee, and I thought that was the important thing because it's going to be my job as the commissioner to implement these measures. So I thought it better to include Danny Campanini, Chief Campanini, our chief of patrol, which we refer to as field services. He's fantastic. He gets it. And I think that he was very beneficial to the committee. And I also want to thank the committee in general because they were great. I mean, there was a lot of meetings. There's a lot of hours. There's a lot of reading. We tried to do everything we could, understanding that people had in the design of the committee, that understand that people had difficult schedules, busy schedules. So like if you couldn't make a meeting, you could always submit questions with email. And, that was very important for us to say, everyone, we made sure we bent over backwards to make sure that everybody's voices were heard on every single issue they wanted to. And I want to thank the chairman too. I know this was a lot of work, Carlos, but you really did a great job, you and the team. So thanks to everybody on the committee. Thanks to Carlos for chairing it. And now we take a lot of these great recommendations and we move them to actionable steps.
Okay. Commissioner, did you want to go through some of the steps?
Shanae has a question. You want to start with Shanae's question? Councilman? Okay.
Does anyone have a question before we move on? I did want to mention, I'm sorry, that our own Tasha Diaz was on the committee. So thank you, Tasha, for all your work. Double duty here.
Start here? Yeah, that's focus area.
I'm sorry. Did anyone, Councilman Williams, did you have a?
He might answer my question in the rest of his report, so I'll wait until he's finished.
So why don't we do this? Let's go through all 8 focus areas. And we'll start with focus area 1 so we can go right down the list. Everyone has the booklet. Thanks to the mayor and the city of Yonkers for doing all this publishing for us. It really came out as the document looks very professional, and it kind of, what we tried to do was basically line up everything that the reimagining of police and police reform included in the governor's executive order, and just go step by step by step. So the first focus area was addressing mental health, substance abuse, and homeless calls. This is a huge issue for the Yonkers Police Department. I know Councilwoman Williams is on both sides of this, because she lives in the downtown. She's a great neighbor to us, and she's an active participant in a lot of our calls. And one of the biggest calls is some of the issues with the homeless population. So one of the recommendations was to establish a mental health crisis outreach team and policy that includes trained professionals that can serve as primary responders. I can tell you I am all for this. I love the idea. The question is cost. I think one of the reasons why police departments have kind of been thrust into the mental health response sphere is simply because no one else is available at certain times, and there aren't always resources available at times. I believe, and I would ask the council, primarily the mental health is really the responsibility of the county government. Is that accurate or not accurate? Somebody's got to say something. Yes?
Yes.
Well, having worked with the county, yes, the Department of Mental Health deals with mental health issues.
Okay, so the first recommendation was to establish a mental health crisis and outreach team. We did have Lamont Brown. We're still waiting for him to be replaced. He was embedded with the Yonkers Police for the last 6 or 7 years before he retired. Tremendous asset. He had an MSW in social work with an emphasis on mentally ill people and homelessness, so it was a great partnership. We're still waiting on getting someone to replace him. I would be all for this. I can tell you as police commissioner, if I had my druthers, I would rather the police not respond to mental health crisis calls. I think that, no matter how good we get, we're not going to have the level of expertise as a mental health professional. We don't have the resources to train people to that level. The question just is, how do you provide resources when there's 7 and 8 and 10 and 12 mental health crises happening at the same time? Because response times are very important in these types of situations. That's number one. Number two, are they going to work around the clock? The cops are there on Christmas Eve. The cops are there, on Easter and every holiday and every day, 24 hours a day. What is the cost of a full-time 24-hour 7-day-a-week, 365-day-a-year crisis team? I think with this, again, I support this recommendation. My advice is we need to kind of partner with the county and the rest of the municipalities in the county to see if we can't do something on a countywide basis. We're still going to have Lamont Brown, and of course the council would have to authorize more funding for another mental health professional, but we'd be all for it. These are really challenging things to respond on. And as you can see nationally, we've been very fortunate here in Yonkers that our officers do a really good job with de-escalation. We are training. We're continuing to come up with new novel ways to train with this type of thing. One in particular is the ICAT training, which we're going to be rolling out. Right now we're doing Procedural Justice and Project Able, and then after that it'll be ICAT. But I support it. I just think we have to put our heads together on how to implement this and get more mental health professionals on the ground that can respond and be first responders or respond in tandem with the police. Does anyone have any questions about that? Yes, Council President Cater.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. And if this question is redundant, I'm sorry I logged on. Right now, what does the department have on? It's a two-part question. What does the department have on staff now, or through staff or contract, for mental health professionals? And what training does the patrol receive in dealing with service calls that require mental health services?
So first of all, the county provided Lamont Brown. So the county paid for that, and we're still advocating actively. Councilwoman Williams, were you involved in that? Have we had conversations about if they're going to bring him back or anything like that? Get another one?
I have reached out and spoke to actually the county legislator's assistant, Shatikan. She did say that he was replaced, that they did hire someone, and I was trying to get the information, but I never did. So I don't know who that. I've never met the person, but I believe that they did replace them. They did replace Lamont.
I don't think there's anybody down with us, though. So there is no one down with us.
Yeah, I haven't personally met them or seen the person in the downtown or at any of the shelters, so I really don't know. But I can.
We'll have to follow up on that for sure. Because if they did hire someone, that's good news. Maybe he's in training, but we haven't seen him down in our downtown, and I think we would have known about it. To your second question, Council President, we also do de-escalation training for the officers. It's not enough. But we also are embarking on a couple of other different types of training, in particular with autistic people, for the officers to kind of understand what they go through and the best way to manage them as they go. One of my recommendations, too, would be that there may be a good way. One more thing I want to mention, our crisis negotiation team. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. They normally go when there's a hostage situation where someone is barricaded. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone's holding someone hostage, but maybe they're locked in their house and they're threatening to do harm to themselves. So our crisis negotiation team will come, and it really was great when it was established. We've had tremendous success. I don't think there's been a single instance where when the crisis intervention team was called out that it didn't result in a safe and a favorable ending, where we got the person to the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. So that's really good. But that's mostly on situations that are, could be violent or threatening harm to oneself or harm to somebody else. I hope that answers the question, Councilman. Does anyone have any questions about 1.1? Should I go to 1.2? 1.2?
Definitely, yes.
Through the
Okay,
chair, Commissioner, this is
Okay, go ahead, John.
yes, this is thank you. So logistically, how does that work when there is a call for someone who it may potentially be mentally disturbed? In this case, let's say it is a homeless person. How is the coordination between the county and when Lamont was there and the Yonkers Police Department when these things happen so quickly?
Lamont was fantastic. So Lamont could do a lot of different things to your question. Like if there's an immediate issue, he'd be on scene. But a lot of it was Lamont's job was to conduct outreach with homeless. And again, many of the homeless have other issues. That's why they're homeless. They're mentally ill or they're addicted to drugs. So Lamont was constantly trying to find ways to connect with these folks to get them to accept services, to accept housing, to accept treatment. So that's what we'd be looking for. One of the things we did recognize, too, and I'll let Chief Campanini speak to this, is we did not have a policy on how to deal with mentally ill people. So we are currently devising a policy where we can take best practices. Dan, do you want to speak to that quickly?
Good afternoon, everyone. So one of the first things that we noticed when we took a look at this focus area, particularly, is that, as the Commissioner just noted, there was no policy. And one thing we see across the country is when we're dealing with emotionally disturbed persons, we see an increased risk for injuries to that individual and also injuries to the police officers. And we also know that the longer the interaction and the engagement goes, the greater the risk for injury. And we've seen it across the country. So we identified this as an area to draw up a policy, have a better screening, which is something that we'll get into as we slide down to the next focus area, but better screening for our dispatchers, our call takers, to inquire as to whether or not there is mental illness history, mental illness premise history. Are there any weapons at scene? So we want to develop out some better screening for our call takers. We want to develop out a policy of response where our emergency services personnel would be first to respond because they're better equipped to deal with the emotionally disturbed person. They're better equipped to deal with our less than lethal use of force. If force is going to be needed to be used at the scene, we'd rather have our trained personnel in emergency services be the first ones there, be the lead on those type of calls. So this was an obvious need, and this is something that we can institute and work on rather quickly, working on best practices and developing a policy that we'll be able to get out to our teams rather quickly.
Thank you. So the Reform Committee wasn't making the recommendation that the police remove themselves from these types of calls, but to also have some additional assistance and training.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. If you look at the recommendation, it's inclusive of trained professionals that could serve as the primary responders that do not involve a legal issue or high threat of violence or risk to individuals or others. So they are parsing out, Councilman, those non-physically threatening calls or calls that result in crime where they could have trained professionals that could respond first. But there's a price tag on that. And like I said, I would not be unhappy as police commissioner to extract ourselves from those calls if the council can come up with a way to fund it.
Thank you. Do you want to move on to focus area number 2?
Yes. So the next recommendation was improve and expand programming at Westchester County operated homeless shelters. This is something that we are very big on because we're constantly challenged with quality of life issues, as well as the homeless and the mentally ill down in the downtown. So, the homeless shelters have to be homeless person centric. And we have to, one of the things that my officers do, which I'm so proud of, is they're very proactive. And they go out, they interact with the homeless all the time. And one of the things we started picking their brain is to say, well, why do you never go to a given shelter? And what they'll tell you is because, for example, there are cubbies in each shelter where you can take your belongings when you want to go in and sit down and get something to eat or whatever, and you can put your backpack or whatever you own in these cubbies, but they weren't secure. So they wouldn't go in because they felt like someone else would steal their stuff. So we want to work closely with whatever homeless shelters are going to be established in Yonkers to listen to what the homeless people are saying and saying like, well, now we need lockers. Would that entice someone to better support the county-operated homeless shelters? We think it's important to listen to the people who will be serviced at these locations about what they would like to see so that we can get them off the street and we can get them, because when you get them into a good, healthy environment in a county-operated homeless shelter, you're also talking about other services that are offered. So I think it's a win-win. Anybody have any questions about that?
Which I just want to add, it's important to make sure that we get the supportive services from the homeless shelters, because a lot of the homeless we deal with, not only in Yonkers but in other places, are people that are considered MICA people, which is the mentally ill, chemical dependent individuals or addictive people. So making sure that we get them to the right place and that the supportive services are there is crucial. And, whether it's the mental health or the Medicaid part of it is a county piece.
And I also have to applaud Richard Nightingale and West Hab because they're bringing together this new novel idea of a different type of homeless outreach person that is not directly attached to the police. And the way Richard explained it to me when he spoke to myself and Deputy Mayor Kavanaugh was that you need to have this interaction day after day after day after day. If you're interacting with a homeless person and it happens, it happens all day, every day, and there's a lot of interaction, there's trust that's built up, and then there's, somewhat legitimacy, and then maybe they can work on getting them to a shelter, getting them to get services, getting them to get psych services or whatever they need. So, this hasn't been studied, hasn't been researched. There's no white papers on this approach, but we're hoping that we'll see some success with it. Any other questions about that one?
Quick question. Do the homeless we have, are they Yonkers? Are they coming because they are they Yonkers residents originally, or they just end up in Yonkers and they weren't really from Yonkers, but they're here now? That's
a great question. There's a combination of both. There's a combination. We have had people that when we ask them, they say, I'm from North Carolina or from New Rochelle or California. Others are from Yonkers. So it's a combination.
Thank you.
Any other questions about 1.2? Okay, so we'll move to focus area number 2, which kind of interrelates with focus area number 1. This is improved communication between caller dispatch and police. And what the reform committee found was that when officers go to a scene, the incident and the situation, the fact pattern is different than the initial call for service. So it really does affect how the officers respond. And sometimes it will increase the likelihood of a negative interaction between officers and the members of the community. So what the police reform committee came up with was to establish and raise public awareness of best practices for calling 911. That's an easy one. We can do that. We can use it through social media, through our community groups, through the council, through the mayor's office, all kinds of different not-for-profits, community groups to kind of come up with a good way to give residents a good idea about what the best practices are when they're reporting an emergency. Kind of like the who, what, where, when, how. I think it's a great idea. We definitely can do it. It's not too expensive, and I think it'll definitely help a lot. Any questions about that one? Okay. 1.2, improve and expand, provide additional training to dispatchers for screening mental health emergencies. I love this one too. What's that thing?
That's right, touched on.
I love this one too. Danny touched on it. This is getting training, special training for the dispatchers to almost triage a call before it comes in. So if our dispatchers are specially trained when there's someone is in mental health crisis, we can train them through mental health professionals to ask the right questions to find out exactly what the situation is. We might think it's a kid acting out. And if the right questions are asked, it could be that the kid is autistic. And if we had someone with professional training, they'd be able to ask questions about what the officer should do and what not to do if a child was on the spectrum, for example. And that would pretty much apply to anything. It's just getting more information, getting better information. The only way you do that is by asking the right questions. So I'm all for that. We definitely want to give additional training for the dispatchers to kind of triage these mental health calls. Does anybody have any questions, Carson?
Hi, Commissioner, and thank you.
Hello.
I actually have a comment for the previous point. I didn't realize my camera was off. So in the establishing and raising awareness for the best practices and calling 911 or reporting an emergency. So one of the things that I think would be helpful to the public at large is that a lot of folks don't know that direct number to the Yonkers Police Department, and how that could save folks like even seconds and minutes. So I think some campaign around, sharing that number and letting people know, how that number can speed things up, I think is very important and could be very helpful to communities and getting better access to responding to emergencies, real emergencies.
Absolutely on target. Thank you, Councilwoman. I'll put that into context. So what Councilwoman Pineda Isaac is talking about is a lot of times people say, I called the desk in the precinct. What we need to, and I constantly used to do this as a precinct captain, explaining to my community groups, that's redundancy. So you call the desk in the precinct and he just forwards it to the computer-aided dispatcher, our communications division. So what Corazon is talking about is, yes, we need to understand what is a 911 emergency, what is an emergency that doesn't put anyone in imminent danger. So yes, we can add that, and it's a great point because we're constantly dealing with that people call the precinct desk saying, well, my precinct, because I guess maybe 30 years ago you could call the desk and they would dispatch from there. Now we have a centralized location that dispatches the entire city. So thank you, and that's a great point. We will include that. Any other questions about the public awareness? Okay. I'm sorry. So we did 1.4 with the additional training for dispatchers screening mental health emergencies. What I will do is, as we start to roll this stuff out, I'll provide updates, of course, to show that we're taking actionable steps. So you guys will be plugged into, how things are going with this. Focus area number 3 was law enforcement presence in schools. So there's a lot of national attention on this, saying they didn't want cops in schools, especially with respect to an enforcement presence. Didn't affect us all that much because we haven't been in the schools for probably 8 or 10 years. We were, but then the grant weren't out. We couldn't afford it. And frankly, there's not a need to have officers. The violence level and things like that doesn't rise to having to have officers in schools. We think a presence is good. But what the recommendation of the council was in 1.5 was to keep the presence in school limited to student engagement opportunities. So what we talk about when we're referring to student engagement opportunities, it's all positive. It's all positive stuff. It's the PBA has a fantastic program called the BRIC program where they've gone and they've talked to students, and it's basically just a circle, everyone sitting in a chair, round table discussion, everyone talks. Any questions? There's no questions that are stupid. There's no questions that are out of bounds, and we just want to create more interaction. So we're in the schools, but it's not in relation to arrest. I can say that we can even take this a little bit further and possibly try to dial in and refine if there is an arrest that has to occur in a school, because sometimes it does. If a child, comes to school with a knife or something like that, or something like, it does happen, and we have to make an arrest, we can kind of refine to make it as discreet as possible. What is a good entrance and exit where we can get the kid out without any embarrassment or causing any of the other students any kind of concern or anything like that. So we can refine that. Any questions about that? Okay.
Anthony, you have a question? Councilman Moranti?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. With regard to number 1.5, what is the negative part of having the school resource officers available? I mean, I was a big, everyone knows that I was an education advocate for many years. My kids are now, 26 and 20. So I was out there. I was a PTA parent. I was out into the schools, and then that DARE program was there when the police would come in and talk to the children. I thought that was so important. I mean, the resource officers, again, what's the negative connotation that about having them there? I think that's a great interaction with the students and then the police to give them that. And it coincides with the education one that was reported in one of the later recommendations. So, educate me as to the negative part.
So this was, again, because we haven't had police officers in schools in recent memory. This wasn't more of a national issue. The issue is that the committee and even the police department, myself, didn't want this to be an enforcement-based interaction. So in other words, the officers are there as disciplinarians, the officers are there as people to arrest and things like that. We just think that it's starting off on the wrong foot with the youth in Yonkers that we're trying to connect with. So, to your point, I understand what you're saying. I think it all depends on philosophy. I think it all depends on how you implement the program. There are some schools that have huge arrest rates, and I don't think that's what we want to do. I don't think our schools are anywhere near that. I think Superintendent Kazad and his team does a fantastic job of keeping everything orderly. So that's not necessary. So to your point, Councilman Moranti, I think it's more people's resistance is a concern to say do we want the kids to interact with the police for the first time? If they're not involved in engagement, they're involved in proactive law enforcement. Does that make sense?
Again, I would say as a school resource officer, as someone as a role model type of person versus someone that has to be used, but to be there, again, I don't understand the interaction part about it. That I guess I can almost accept part of that answer. But I just think that, again, presence in a school, even if it's on a part-time basis, just again, because, to have the youth look at the police department on a positive note versus a negative note, again, I guess maybe the word resource officer has to be changed to something that's it's the DARE officer that's there a little more frequently or something or other and just in case something happens. That's all. It's just to begin the interaction with police. That police are not bad, and they're there to help.
Well, I think if you look at this recommendation, Councilman, that's kind of what the spirit of what they were recommending was. They want officers engaged with the schools, but the school presence should be limited to engagement opportunities, exactly what you're describing. So I think that's been built into this recommendation in 1.5, that we want to keep it positive. We want to have the kids, because a lot of times if we did have a presence in school, that might be the very first interaction that one of our youth has with the police. So let's make sure that that's as positive as it can be, so we have something to build on. Make sense?
Right. Let's call it Dare on steroids. Let's get them in there. So this way they get in there a little more often to have these interactions. That's I think that's I'd be happy with that.
Okay.
Can I just add that one of the other critical areas when we talk about policing strategies in the community, part of that is really trying to create or expand on the positive relationships or interaction between police and the community, whether it's children, adults. So in the other parts, we're talking about more police community involvement. So besides whatever we have at schools, we're going to have more of an enhanced presence in the community through other programs that provide support, not just in terms of police actions, but supports that they need to live their everyday life. So there's another piece to it that is beyond being in school. So children would be, relating with police officers outside of school also.
Yep. Council President Cater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. Councilman Moranti mentions the DARE program, which I remember in school. But I also remember when I was in high school, there was like programs that didn't cost, like the Scared Straight program, where I remember me and my friends, they took us to the county jail and state prison, and try to scare straight. And there was, there was a gang specialist. Again, not more for law enforcement, but more for engagement. Is there anything as we go now that, not necessarily those programs, but similar type of programs that are now?
Council President, that is the studies and the research I've read about the Scared Straight programs show that there's not a whole lot of efficacy with them, that, it doesn't seem to provide a deterrent. And what we're looking for is what we call in the police world is called focused deterrence. So what we are doing is, and we've already started with this as far as, so you have your average student, and then you have some kids that are more problematic, discipline issues. A lot of times, if we share notes with the Board of Education as far as some of the kids that we're mostly concerned about, that list is going to almost mirror each other between the Board of Ed and the Yonkers PD. So what we did was we put together what we refer to as a mom summit, and we reached out to 15 families that we thought were most in crisis, and we went by what the issues were on the street, what our gang officers saw, to your point about interacting with the gang unit, and we sat down with the Board of Education, the mayor, the acting commissioner of social services in Westchester County, and we came up with, we're trying to put all the services together to help the mom or the caregiver. In most cases, it was the mom, to try to figure out what we could do for her. So, for example, does she have rent insecurity? Does she also have issues with addiction? Traditionally, these needs and these services are all siloed, so one isn't talking to the other. The county, at the request of the mayor, was kind enough to supply a social worker for each caregiver or mom to kind of put the whole thing together so it's one-stop shopping. And the next step is to work on the kids. Alongside of that is the Board of Education, where they're also working on lesson plans and making sure what's going on in school. So we're trying to create, and I believe Carlos can speak to it because he was at the meeting as well, but that's an example of some of the initiatives we're doing with focused deterrence.
This holistic approach is really a good one. One-stop shopping is the perfect word for it. Communication, education, programs, whether it's social programs, police and what the police, are seeing and involvement with youth or other people. I think that's a great program, and hopefully we can continue to expand that. But it's really a holistic approach to dealing with these residents that need our help, holistically, not just the police.
And to your question, President Cater, we also have the Youth Police Initiative, which we call YPI. It's expensive, but we do it, where it's a long-term relationship, because what we've realized, and it's not us, it's researchers, that you don't really get down to the nitty-gritty with other people that you don't know in an hour or two. So there's a lot of intentional group think type exercises that last for weeks, where the same cops interact with the same kids and talk about their experiences. And what we found is, as good as it is for the kids, it's great for the cops too. So we love that program. I hope that is that something that the kind of question you were asking?
Yeah, I wasn't asking particularly, but like for demonstrative purposes, for example, I mentioned the Scared Straight program because that's what I went to. But yeah, you did answer the question about different ideas, techniques, and stuff. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else with this section? Where are we at now?
Councilwoman Diaz.
You could go to 2.1.
Councilwoman Diaz is.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add something to this, being that City Council President mentioned programs. I myself was in one of the programs that they used to have in the school system that used to work along with the police department, and it was a leadership program. And what they did was they went to the schools and they got children from different walks of life, whether you was a leader or you were a follower, and they intermixed us all. We went away to this camp out in the woods, and they intermixed everybody, and we went out and they had the leaders actually show the followers how to become leaders. And we did that through different exercises. One of them being that we had to stand in a tree and think, have the person, have that belief that the people there would catch us when we fell. And you had to fall straight back and have that belief that the people that you have bonded with would be there to save you. And there were many different exercises we did, and that proved to other people that thought that they couldn't be leaders, how to be leaders, how to start that path, and how to be the one, it's okay to be the first one to start something. And I think that that's another program that we need to implement, because I think if we pull out a little bit more leaders within the community and within the school system, we can get to these people. We could get to more people that need help. Because myself being in the community, a lot of people sometimes are silenced and are scared to say a lot of things because they feel like something is wrong because they have certain issues at home. As you know, Commissioner, when people have certain things at home, they think it's not okay to let that be known. And that's where they fail themselves because they don't reach out for the help. So I feel as if we get some kind of programs inside the schools and with the police department, something like a mentoring leadership program. I know a lot of parents have reached out to me saying that the work that I've been doing in the community with the police department, that they would like their children to be a part of a mentor program with certain police officers that they have seen out in the community, like Officer Pinto and different officers that had been out with me, during the summer when we did the food programs and things like that. And there was a disabled woman that came out with her son, and she really, really enjoyed that interaction that her child had with the police department. And, Pinto has been in touch with her, and they've started a little bond there. And I think that's where it starts. So if that's a program that we can try to implement somewhere in this to say, we need to pull out the leaders. I think that that's something that would be beneficial as well.
I love the idea. And to your point, Officer Pinto is outstanding. He really is good. So we can look into something like a leadership program. We do have the cadet program. And also in the schools, we also have the Yonkers Force, which people know we have one of our community affairs officers embedded with the force when they're practicing and things like that. And we're starting to think about a lacrosse program as well. So all good things. Any other questions about 1.5? Okay, so we'll go to focus area 4, which is procedural justice and community policing strategies. So we'll start with what they came up with. The Yonkers Police Reform Committee came up that they found that the YPD trains and engages all officers in strategic community policing. Members are also currently scheduled to go through procedural justice training, including implicit bias training and a full day dedicated to discussion on racism, sponsored by Yale University. The department also has robust community outreach and violence interruption programs, as well as dedicated community affairs units tasked with developing relationships with residents and businesses in every neighborhood. So here are the recommendations on that. Develop a comprehensive community policing strategic plan to ensure the entire department understands and supports a policing model reflecting our desired vision. I love this one. And this is something we're going to build on. I'm very excited about it. I think the spirit of this recommendation has to do with the fact that we have I mean, I've been in the Yonkers PD for well over 25 years, and we've never had a better community affairs unit. But the community affairs unit is not the end-all, be-all of community affairs. They're great about launching programs. It's great to have this committed resource that do this full time. But really, what this recommendation is, in my opinion, is about creating a culture-wide community policing for everybody, particular those officers in patrol, about how they're interacting, what they're doing, and how we do outreach. So we're going to be building out a comprehensive program about how to develop this culture. And one of the things I think we can do is when community affairs is out doing something positive, we can see if we can't get a number of officers, off of patrol for a little while to go and join them. Because I think that's really the, kind of the state of grace of community policing. We will win the day with community affairs in business, but really the best opportunity any police department has for community outreach is the officer on patrol. The truth is that the average person probably interacts with the police, meeting them, probably less than 5 times their entire lifetime. If you do those 5 right, you'll have a friend forever. And it's always about trying to make a friend. It's always about trying to build a positive relationship. Every time someone calls the police, we have an opportunity to develop a relationship. And that's kind of what I think the spirit of this 2.1 is to start building this out with patrol in mind. And if one of those interactions goes wrong, it can sour people for years, and we don't want that. So, and I think the nature of our business, everyone must understand that usually there's someone who's happy and someone who's not happy, because that's what we do. We're there to mediate. We're there to sometimes arrest people. I think the goal, more importantly, is satisfaction. Did both groups feel satisfied? I think that the procedural justice training goes a long way for this. I was a huge proponent of this because I was looking for research-based training, because there's a lot of stuff now out there, but we don't know what the efficacy of it is. Is it effective? Is it not effective? I will tell you about procedural justice. It stood up to research. It was Yale University Northwestern. They studied the Chicago PD. So that's a department you can study to scale. They have 10,000 police officers. Every single metric that judges police community interactions improved when these officers went through procedural justice. So we're doing that right now. Any question about that? Councilwoman Williams?
I'll just unmute myself. Thank you, Commissioner. So my question, you just said that you guys are in the process of doing you're going through the process of doing the procedural justice training program. Mm-hmm. So can you talk to me a little bit more about that? Because in the recommendations, it said that it will include like implicit bias training, and it will be a full day that's dedicated towards a discussion on racism, right, through Yale. So, because that I've always been advocating for implicit bias training in our police and fire department and all of our departments, and this is something that's very important to me that I think will really help shift the culture of how our employees behave and think and work together. So I would like to know a little bit more, like who is currently in this training? Are you starting with all new officers? Are you starting with the leadership? Like, how does that break down? Like, what's happening? Is everyone going to take their turn to go get it done? Are we looking at multiple days broken, throughout the year that they're going to get these trainings, or it's just one day where the whole department? Like, how does it work?
That's a great question. So I went first because I wanted to see how it works. So procedural justice is broken down into 3 segments now. It's being fine-tuned, but the main point, I think, is the first step is the procedural justice piece. That's what we refer to as PJ1, Shanae. PJ1 is being rolled out right now to the entire department. So we have included this in our in-service. So it's 8 hours of procedural justice. So what is procedural justice? The best way to explain procedural justice is it's just common sense, that you treat everyone the way you'd want your family treated. So what does that entail? There are 4 pillars in procedural justice, and I hope I get them right because I'm taking it off my head. The first one is to be clear about your intentions. So traditionally in police departments, a lot of the reasons why things go sideways is because we don't explain why we're doing what we're doing. And people deserve respect, and they deserve an explanation in a polite way. I'm sorry that we're doing this right now, but we're doing it because. And I can tell you my own experience as a police officer, that really does change the tempo of when you're interacting with someone. So that's the most important one. Why you're doing what you're doing. You must allow the person you're interacting with to have a voice. So you have to allow them to have their say, no matter what. You know, it's not, we don't want to hear what you have to say. No, you have to let people talk. So I'm explaining to you why I'm here. You can explain to me why you're frustrated, and we go from there. The third pillar is making sure that you have credible, legitimate intentions. So let me use an example of how this is practiced. We have a situation now, and I know, Shanae, I'm going to use this because you've sat there and you've listened to it, where we have a lot of the elderly communities of color in Harka, right, be frustrated about some guys on the corner of Glenwood or Warburton. You've heard those conversations? Yes. So we would traditionally just go and tell those guys, get off the corner. The procedural justice model says, well, wait a second. They live there. They don't have a backyard. That's their backyard. So we have to respect that and start from there. Traditionally, what we would do is say, get out of here or get off the corner. They live there. And they would get off. We usually didn't result in any kind of bad interaction. But at the end of the day, it doesn't solve the problem because the minute the cops drive away, everyone goes back in the corner. So procedural justice in this instance is used to say, I'm going to explain to you why we're here. So we don't say who's doing the complaining, but we say people are concerned about you guys smoking marijuana out here as they're putting little kids on the bus to go to school. People are concerned because you're out here throwing dice and they don't really like it. So when you're conveying these things and saying it's not coming from me, it's coming from other people in your community, can you cooperate? Can you work with us on this? So we're having success with that. So that's kind of an example of how procedural justice plays out. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, no, for sure. So my follow-up question, Commissioner, is: were you finished with the four, or I think those were three? Yeah,
it was three. The fourth one is an overall strategy of fairness, where it's just always think about what is fair, like what is the fairness thing to be. I can send you all the whole thing because it's an interesting package. It was actually put together as a result of Barack Obama's 21st Century in Policing. It's a fantastic read. Everyone should read it. It was co-authored by Charles Ramsey, former Philadelphia police commissioner, visionary in the police profession. Fantastic, amazing guy. And this was after Michael Ferguson. Then there's PJ2. Is that what you're asking about, the implicit bias component?
No. So I was going to ask, the follow-up question was, so the procedural justice training program sounds great just from the one section that you told us about just now. But my question is, how is it being administered? Are they sitting in front of a computer and just learning about it that way? What is the process?
So we hired a contractor that we're paying to do this because we felt as though the message would be better coming from the outside than training. As much as I love my training unit and they're fantastic, sometimes we all know when you're listening to the same teacher every day for an entire semester, sometimes it turns into just noise. So we thought that this was important enough to bring someone from the outside to teach this. The classes are broken up into about 20 people. That is because there's a lot of breakout sessions contained within. So you don't want to go too small because now if you do 20, say, you have 4 groups of 5 or 5 groups of 4. So that's a good breakout session type group. And you don't want to go too big because then it gets unwieldy. A lot of the procedures, because I went through both, is about conversations. And it's about kind of getting people to really open up about race relations and how to treat people properly and why we're not. And there's also a really good component, which I think helps the cops buy into it even more, is the health and wellness aspect of it. That, you need to take care of yourself before you can take care of other people. Mm-hmm. There's also an internal procedural justice piece that I'm going to speak at, I think, in the middle of March at DCJS about how managers in the Yonkers Police Department need to practice procedural justice. So I'm not dealing with the community as much as an officer on patrol. Am I doing procedural justice, giving people a voice, letting them be heard, explaining why I'm doing what I'm doing to my employees? Because I've said it all along to new supervisors, if you create an environment in the precinct where officers are in a position of readiness to serve. So what does that mean? There's an environment in the precinct where people are valued, appreciated, listened to, consulted with. What do you think they're going to do when they go out and see the public? They're going to do the same thing. Conversely, if you mistreat the cops in the precinct, they're going to probably go out and do unto others the same. So there's an internal procedural justice piece as well that we're working on. The second piece to procedural justice is PJ2, which is a whole day, 8 hours of implicit bias. So then we go into a lot of discussions about that. And it's interesting how it really turns into a very healthy discussion. I've gotten good feedback. I've gotten bad feedback on it. I'm still carefully listening to everybody and how they feel about it. But I can tell you that that's pretty much any training I get. I do believe it's provocative, and I think provocative is what we're looking for here.
Okay, and my last question before I let you continue with the rest of your presentation. Are the officers that's currently going through this training, are they doing so through overtime, or is it just like a regular work day for them?
This is a regular work day for them. So we have to, as per the DOJ, we're mandated to have 4 8-hour days of training. So officers, every year we refer to it as in-service. I'm sorry I didn't explain that earlier. There are 4 8-hour tours of in-service. No one who goes there gets overtime. Sometimes if we don't have enough officers, by bringing those officers in, we have to pay other people to work the overtime. But we've done a pretty good job with balancing, our manpower and our resources where it hasn't been crazy expensive. There is the other component of paying the instructors, but yeah.
That's good. Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. So any other questions about procedural justice? Okay. So the second recommendation was 2.2, bring YPD community affairs units into neighborhoods. You partner with community organizations. You identify neighborhood locations that can host community affairs programs, while also serving as safe places for families to gather and parent and youth support services. I love this. This is great. This is like the idea of, if there's going to be something at a park or something like that, it's, the cops can be there, or community affairs can be there to connect and try to do things together with the community. No brainer, easy to do. My community affairs people are tremendously motivated, so they're already all over this. Any questions about that? Okay. This one I'm very excited about. This is 2.3, establish consistency in community outreach patrols. So better familiarize precinct officers with community, proactively offer resources and assistance to those in need, and establish positive police-community interactions. Not unlike what 2.3 is, but what we are doing, and this is something that the mayor's already signed off on, we're going to do, when new officers come out, one of the things that I've heard for years about the needs of the community is to have dedicated foot patrols in neighborhoods. Glenwood and Warburton, the waterfront, Elm and Oak, McLean Avenue. Did I hit every council person's district? Yes, probably. So the idea is we have these 10 new officers, usually 10 to 20, that are freshly minted, that are coming out of the academy. What we're going to do is, all they're going to do all summer is, when they get out of the academy, they're going to walk foot posts. They're going to be under the guidance of a supervisor, very intense supervision because they're new. But we think what this is going to do is they're going to start by learning how to deal with the community immediately, because they're not going to get cars. They're not even driving a car to a foot post. They're going there, and they're going to be there on the post for 8 hours, and they're going to interact with the community. We think over this summer, these 4 months of dealing with this, and we're going to try to develop a curriculum for these new officers where they can, we actually, put on several metrics. We can say, like, how many stores did you go to today? How many people did you meet? What were the issues? Can you bring anything back about complaints or anything? Because we think that this is the way forward to get everyone involved in community outreach. This is an extension of what I talked about earlier of saying really the community policing is really going to be focused on patrol, because that's where we need help and that's where we can do better. So by getting these guys out on a foot post for the first 6 months of their career, I think we're putting them in a great position to really get to know the community, to learn and develop communication skills and problem solving. So I'm pretty excited about it. And the mayor's totally supports this. Any questions about that? Okay. This is 2.4, invest in marketing for community affairs programs. So you want to attract a broader pool of residents who could benefit from the programs. This was something that I heard also from several members of the Reform Committee. In particular, one young man who I've become very friendly with. He said, you don't have a problem with the programs you have a branding problem. right? And it makes sense. Like, we're not marketing. We don't know how to market. And we have like 40-something community outreach programs, but everyone says, well, I didn't know anything about it. We put it on Facebook. We put it on Twitter. We have it on our website. But obviously, we have to do more. So we're looking for other ways to broadcast what we do, why we do, how we do it. So we're going to be working on that too. But I really, that stuck with me when Donnell said to me, you know, you have a branding problem, that you're not, you know, this isn't getting out. And I would love to hear any kind of input from any of the people on the call to say how we can do that better. Because we're already really big into social media. We're already out there in the street with the community outreach program. So does anybody have any suggestions with that of what that would look like? Okay.
It'll help, Commissioner. Oftentimes we'll get like the flyers and information from the mayor, and we get a lot of flyers from like the Parks Department. They're very good at getting information to us, and we can like share it in our networks and ask them to share it as well. So that can, if your communications team within YPD can start sending us those flyers of you know, different YPD communications, that would be helpful.
Consider it done. So you would like to have it like in a PDF, Shanae, where we would just send it to you and say, hey, this is, or push it out on your Facebook pages. Okay. Council President Cater.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Mueller. I want to echo a little bit of what Councilman Williams just said. Obviously, you know, the flyers, I believe most of us here have a weekly newsletter or a social media presence, but also I really think that just scratches the surface, particularly for the communities that we need to reach. You know, our residents without homes, our undocumented residents. So, yeah, you know, what's great about social media, a lot of people have it and it's free, so it doesn't cost. But ultimately, the people that get those messages aren't the target audience. So I generally think that sending letters in the mail is just as ineffective, or social media. I mean, we've seen with the inequity of lack of internet access. I generally think the best way to get that marketing out there is direct contact.
Do you think, so the first thing, I guess, Council President, is we would have to kind of really get people to, the direct contact would be, they'd have to be on an email list, or they'd have to be on our Facebook page and be Facebook friends so they could see it. Maybe what I'm also thinking, based on what you're describing, is we should be pushing this out, I'm sure we do, and really encouraging our community groups, partners like TARCA and the Mexican Chamber of Commerce, to say, you guys got to push this one out, put that one out, and we'll send it to everybody. We can send it to them, and hopefully, you know.
Well, you know, yeah, that's more in line. What it appears it does, and this is not starting from the top down, doesn't get the message across. What it really has to do is from the bottom up, because really, who is the target audience for these outreach initiatives? Unfortunately, it's the people that don't have constant contact, that are not on the Yonkers Police, email list. You know, but you do make very good. You made a very good recommendation. You know, HARCA, Mexican Chamber of Commerce. You got Catholic Charities. You have community leaders. So I think going and expanding your universe into those spaces, and then hopefully you build that relationship where they could share it out. I think just, Facebook, it just doesn't cut it, to be quite frank.
Yeah, I think the issue, even with the mailing, though, like when we look at, we try to, be as efficient as possible, obviously, because we have a budget we have to live within, but like, one postcard mailing, and I think you guys all being elected officials, one postcard is $30,000 to mail that. So, like you said, we have to maybe come up with other ways, like you said, creative ways. Councilwoman Pineda?
Thank you, Commissioner. I think one way that also would be, those new officers that you're going to put on foot posts. Maybe part of the things that they can do is also promote these programs as they're out there in the community. So, giving flyers to the local bodegas and the local businesses so that they could put on their windows, and just, as they're talking to people and getting to know them, letting them know, like, these are the programs that we have. Please, spread the word, come join. I think that's one direct way of also getting that information to the communities. I think that, like literature in our districts can probably go a long way. Posting and in buildings. I don't expect us to do door to door because that's a lot of work. But if we can circulate these informations in the communities, maybe that can get the word out. Also, if we could find a way to also further circulate through our Yonkers public schools, that'd be also a way to engage some of our students that are in our communities, and hopefully, they'd be interested in joining some of these different programs that we have and sharing with their families and their parents about what's available with our Yonkers Police Department.
Agreed on all. And like you said, I think this is because, to the president's point, this is a group effort. Like all of us on this call, and it's exponential when you really look at it, when you push it out. There's so many different networks and avenues of communication that we can all use to help get the message out. But absolutely, I love the idea of, having those officers, when we put them on foot posts in April and May, be part of like getting that information out. I'd also like to tell everybody it's not on here, but I have to talk about it because I'm very excited. We're doing a survey this year, and we've done surveys in the past, but I think this is going to be a little bit better survey. And it kind of like speaks to this aspect of the reform recommendations. We're going to be putting out what is referred to as a community vitality survey that is put together by Yale Law School. They've been fantastic partners. It's the Yale Law School Collaborative Justice Program. So they help police department with evidence-based, initiatives. So this community vitality survey is going out to the public, but at the same time, the officers are going to be also surveyed. What we're looking to do is to identify what are the most important aspects of what the community wants from the Yonkers Police Department. And then we're going to ask the officers, what do you think the community wants from you? Now, if these two line up with each other, that's great, because that tells me that we in our mission are addressing the needs of how the community wants us to police and what the community wants us to focus on. If they're in disalignment, then we have a problem, but it's going to be able to identify that. So we're looking forward to that. Any questions about that? Okay. So we are now in 2.5, establish and deploy a clergy response team. We are in the process of doing that. We are now having monthly clergy response meetings. We just had one last night. We've probably been doing this for a good, 8 or 10 months. And we are moving towards a clergy response team. Autumn Edwards, Detective Edwards, one of the best officers we have on our job, is spearheading this, and she's putting together the clergy response team. The idea with the clergy response team is if there's a bad incident, they will have direct access to the police, and we can get that information out so they can share with the community. But it's more than that. It's about, even like last night, the topic was for the clergy response team and the clergy in general was what we're doing with recruitment, and they were interested. And so we can push that message out, say, you help us get the information to all of your different religious denominations and your different, the flocks and all that. And so that's very helpful. Last meeting we had last month, it was meet your captain. So all 4 of our precinct captains were on so they could interact with the captains and get to know them, share emails, exchange phone numbers and all that stuff. So it's a work in progress, but we've been working on a clergy response team. We just want to make sure we get it right. And honestly, we want to make sure that people want to be on there, not for a placard or a jacket, but to help us, use the clergy as a wing of the Yonkers Police Department. Any questions about that? Okay. Now we're going to go to focus area 5, which is address bias-based stop searches and arrests. We're in pretty good shape with this. We do a precision policing model. I'll explain very quickly what that means. I know most of our electeds know what it is. Precision policing, in my opinion, is like the state of grace in how to police because it's an offender-centric model. So what does this mean? It means that if you believe in recidivism, and I do, that recidivists are responsible for like an overwhelming amount of the crime, meaning that 85% of the crime is committed by like less than 5% of the people. Flip that around. That means that 95% of the people in Yonkers aren't committing any crimes. So we don't want to have those negative interactions. By focusing on our top offenders in every crime category, we don't have to do stops as much, and they've gone way down. And by the way, our arrests have gone down. I think at our height, we were doing 7,000 arrests a year, and last year we were well below 4,000 arrests. So it's almost in half, and lo and behold, crime didn't really go up measurably. You know, we've been able to hold the tide on crime, even though we've halved the arrests, which tells you a couple things. It tells you that mass incarceration doesn't work. So when you focus on these subset of offender, and we even get even deeper into it, we talk about even the science of addiction. The science of addiction is, let's say you're addicted to heroin. You're going to get sick if you don't reuse between 6 and 12 hours. So what does that tell us? That means that every single night, those addicts have to get enough money to get their next high. It's not so much they're looking to get high, they're looking to not get sick. So what does that result in? That results in larceny from auto, breaking into cars, sometimes just trying car doors. We know who all these guys are. So when we have an African-American man coming home from work at the MTA, at 11 o'clock at night, we don't have to stop him because he's not on our list of those top offenders. You focus on those top offenders, you prosecute them, you try to get jail time for them, you try to get drug rehab if you can, but at the end of the day, you focus on them. So our race-based stops and our stops in general are way down, our arrests are down. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. That's a good one. I'm glad I was able to share the precision policing model because I just think this is the way forward for law enforcement in general. You know, most people are great people and they don't do anything wrong. Let's focus on the ones that continue to offend. Let's deal with them. And then you have this great idea where the police are keeping the community safe in a manner that the community is satisfied and comfortable with. It's a pretty good compromise. So respecting the citizen rights and police procedure during traffic stops, we practice this already with procedural justice, but they're recommending an education program focused on providing the community with an understanding of the best practice for police and drivers. This is a great idea. It's been done already in the Yonkers PD. We're going to do it again based on these recommendations. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Noble, which is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement, already has come up with a template for this, so we can just use that template. What do we want the public to do when we conduct a traffic stop? What do we expect the officers to do when they conduct a traffic stop? Again, it all plays into the procedural justice piece. You want to explain why you're stopping someone. You want to be respectful. You want to allow the people to give their voice, and then you want to end in an interaction where people feel respected. Any questions about that one? Okay. So now we move on to focus area 6, which is citizen oversight, accountability, and transparency. How we're investigating misconduct, citizen reporting for police misconduct. We already, based on the Department of Justice, had a lot of different ways you could file a complaint. You can come in person to any police facility. If you're uncomfortable in a police facility, you can go to Internal Affairs directly. You can mail it, you can phone it, you can fax it. The citizen complaint form is available in English and Spanish, and it's on our website, and you can file it anonymously. So we try to cover all those bases. So one of the things that we think is really going to help increase transparency is the use of body-worn cameras. And I want to thank the council for providing us the funding for this, because it's going to be a big way of really kind of being able to look at these negative interactions and seeing where we can work on, where we can improve, how we can be very refined and precision based on training to make sure that we're learning from our mistakes and we're improving. So the first one was 3.1. This was improve public access to YPD policies, procedures, and disciplinary actions. We are going to put, it's our intention to put the YPD policy and procedure on our website so that everyone can see all of our procedures. Our procedures, by the way, are best practice. So people understand we are an accredited police department. You have to jump through a lot of hoops and you have to do a lot of compliance to become an accredited police department, but we are. So when you look at the policies, what you're going to be looking at is best practice of how to do things. Also, with the disciplinary actions, with the repeal of 50A, we're already pushing out substantiated complaints. It looks like the district court, I think it was Second Circuit Court pushed out that it may even be unsubstantiated complaints. We're looking at that right now, but we're going to push out that information too. Let's see. Yeah, they were also talking about recommending use of force on our policy. Here's the point. We're going to put every policy on. Every policy is going to be on there. So whatever it is, you know, there'll be a glossary, there'll be an appendix. You'll be able to go through it and look at what you want to look at. Any questions about the policy or the disciplinary actions or anything? Okay, we're going to go to performance evaluations, incorporating community policing principles. We don't have a performance evaluation right now. It is a mandatory subject of bargaining. So we would have to go to the table with the two bargaining units of the police department, the CLSA and the PBA. So the recommendation is we can develop a performance evaluation for officers that incorporates metrics based on community policing principles. I have to be honest, I'm not crazy about this because I don't like when you put a metric on anything, you know, in like this. I don't want to create activity equals accomplishment. I think there's a way we can do evaluative things without saying, like, go out there and get, like, here's an example. I love evidence, I love data, and I like metrics, I do. But what I will say is sometimes that goes to sideways. So look at stop, question, and frisk in New York City. It was a technique that they used, and then it turned into just like you have to get 15 a month. So then officers were like forced to go out there and like demand, you know, get people's information when it probably wasn't lawful, certainly wasn't ethical, and it creates a problem. So I'm looking for a more holistic approach of where we can do a real good evaluative of how they're being community policing principles. The metric thing, like, I mean, if I ask someone to go out and say, why don't you have 10 interactions with people, and they go over and I'm not right next to them, they can say, oh, hi, I waved to somebody. So we got to really think about this one. Any thoughts on that? Councilwoman Pineda.
Yeah, I do agree with you that that sometimes certain metrics don't really work, and I think that's where also it went wrong in New York City with stop and frisks, because there were metrics I think put in place where they had to have a certain number of whatever. I think what I'm hoping maybe to see is maybe necessarily like metrics or goals, but we should have some sort of method or way where we can evaluate, you know, police officers' performance. And I don't know if that comes in a way of, I'm not sure. I don't know exactly how to do that, but I do agree that certain specific metrics might make it, instead of organic, and I'm sorry for my kid yelling in the background, but instead of make it organic, it might be forced and, you know, and just doing it so to fulfill, you know, a requirement. So I would like to find the right, I guess, recipe for that.
No, you're right. The right recipe is what matters. We want to do it right. We don't want to do it quick and forsake, you know, doing it right. Two things. Our FTO program, the officers are already evaluated. I think that one of the ways what you're suggesting is we can build out some more community policing things in there to talk about. But I'll just give you an example. If an officer ends up striking up a conversation with a community member and they have a 45-minute or half-hour conversation, which obviously you look at me, I'm very capable of that. That's something to be applauded. That's something to be appreciated. I don't want them to spend 7 minutes with this person and 8 minutes with that and say, look what I did. I talked to 8 people. An hour-long conversation is even better. So we really have to be careful about that. I'm not saying that I'm opposed. I'm more saying that I just want to make sure it's done correctly, if that makes sense. Any other questions with that?
I have a question. Was this something that was obviously it's in the packet, in the report, because I'm guessing the majority of the members of the police reform committee wanted this, or is this something that came from the governor? Where did this idea come from?
No, this came from the committee, and the title of 3.2 is Explore Performance Evaluations Incorporating Community Policing Principles. So a lot of the stuff like this, Councilwoman Williams, there's probably some really good best practice stuff out there already. I'm not willing to, it's great that Glendale does something well, but what I like is to get like a foundation from something that's really working and then really tailor it to Yonkers look at it 6 months from now and make sure it's working. Could it be better? Is it not working at all? Do we need to scrap it, try something else? So I think the main thing is explore how we can do this. So I'm all for that. So the 3.3, improve functions of the Police Professional Standards Review Committee. Right now, that is how we review our complaints. They go to the Professional Police Standards Review Committee. It's a combination, a hybrid version of civilians and sworn staff. I think this is going to be something that's probably going to go to the council, because I know that it is at some point going to come up. Is that accurate, Councilwoman Pineda? I believe you were the sponsor.
It is.
Okay, so what the committee recommended that they would like us to look at the current practices and policies and do additional review and change. They also would like to see a residency requirement. They want to have people have 2 years and no more than 2 years. So it's there's some house cleaning there, but I'm interested to see what's going to happen with what your legislation is, and I think they also want to provide the public with semi-reporting activities of this committee that we can put out to the public. Ms. Williams.
Thanks, Commissioner. So last year when Majority Leader introduced this, I think the majority of my colleagues and myself supported having a civilian complaint review board, because, this was something that the community was calling for. And we had it in committee and we met and we were advised that the police reform committee would look at the legislation that we had in committee and make their recommendations based on that. Can you confirm that happened? Because it sounds like you haven't seen the legislation that was introduced, because you're saying you wanted to know more about it. Did you not have the opportunity to look at that? Or did the committee not have the opportunity to look at that? Maybe Carlos? Maybe.
Yes, yeah, the committee looked at it, and there were maybe 2 comments on it. They're supportive of it. Nothing really remarkable, but just making sure that we do in that committee have some police presence also, because I think the committee is just all citizens. So yes, they looked at it, and there were probably 2 people that commented and said, hey, this is good. We support it, but there was no remarkable or overwhelming support, as we do have this other committee, that the PPSRC, that serves a similar function.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner.
The only thing I would request, I would support having some law enforcement on there, but it may not be that way. That's how government works, and that's fine. But I would ask.
It gives you 3. It gives the police commissioner 3 appointees. So,
right.
Okay. And I would also ask, I think it's very important, because this is, it's a way for us to reach out to the community, but I would also like to make it mandated that any person who is going to serve has to go through the Yonkers Police Civilian Academy. I think that's very healthy, because it kind of explains all of our stuff in real time. I'd like you to consider that, just from my point of view, and maybe a couple of ride-alongs as well.
Okay, I would suggest to my colleagues that we discuss that legislation back again in committee and take all of your considerations, because I think we should move on that and get it, addressed. Thank you.
President Cater?
Thank you, through the chair. Commissioner Mueller, I think the majority leader just answered that there is some representation through yours, but I think that generally speaking, going back to the community to buy in on the civilian complaint review board, that 2 things, I think we're going to need 2 things. One is for it to have effective subpoena power. And I generally think that there has to be funding in the civilian complaint review board, because, again, it's a volunteer board. There's no money. So again, like many of our city boards, they're volunteer. community-minded residents. However, but let's say that they do need an independent person or an independent opinion, or they have to go and investigate. They're going to call the Inspector General or the Yonkers Police Department to investigate one of their own. So, and I'm glad most of our council colleagues are on here, including the sponsors and co-sponsors, is for this Civilian Complaint Review Board to really work. Say there's doing something, and then there's doing something that works. Is one, it needs authority through subpoena power and drawing negative inference if somebody refuses to comply. And it also needs funds to investigate, when necessary, certain complaints. I just wanted to put that on the record, and I hope that when we engage in these conversations with our colleagues, that these two factors are discussed and included in the upcoming budget season. Thank you.
Commissioner, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. We have this committee. I think you need to look at expanding it with civilians, whether the civilians come through the council rather than your office, or whether we put some people on this committee that we can agree to. But I think you need the professionals there that know the lingo. I don't think you put 8 people in a room and say you're the review board that don't know anything to review. So if we could maybe expand this professional standards review committee to include some civilians that don't come through your office but perhaps come through the council, I think that's a good way to keep what's there and then just embellish it with some people that have a different point of view. And that would be my suggestion.
Councilwoman Pineda.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think I'm happy that the committee, discussed it and they gave a couple of suggestions. So I think we'll dive deeper when we host a committee meeting and kind of figure out how do we move forward. So I see folks, have different suggestions. I think that these are all things that we'll bring up in a committee meeting. And obviously, Commissioner, I would love to have you back. And like I mentioned, you do get 3 appointees to the body, so I do think it's important to have folks who have police experience and representation. And I think one of the things that you and I talked about was even the possibility of procedural justice training, I think it's called. So, and maybe folks on the committee even taking that and understanding what that is, so that they understand the interactions between law enforcement and the public and how that works. I don't know too much about it, but I was reading a little bit about it. But we'll discuss more. I think everyone brings up good points, and I'm happy the committee explored it, and I look forward to also continuing the conversation as a body.
Thank you. So 4.1, this is a big one, recruiting and supporting excellent personnel. So obviously we have come up short historically with officers of color, just have. We want, and the mayor wants, this police department to look like the population it serves. So we think that we're going to do really well this coming recruitment cycle. We've already, our CAD and a lot of our officers and our community partners have already started working really, really hard, which is awesome because we don't even have the applications out yet, which is interesting. We're really trying to get in front of this. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You can't have a conversation with a black kid in the library for 5 minutes and convince him to become a police officer. I can't say it any plainer than that. This is a relationship that has to be built over time. There has to be trust, has to be restored. That's what things like the Yonkers Force are about. That's what things like YPI are about. That's things that the Yonkers Cadet Program are about. All these things where we're developing relationships way, way in advance, where there's a level of comfort there. That's the first thing. The second thing is this has to be an entire Yonkers Police Department effort. I know that there are people that believe black officers are in the best position to recruit black candidates. Sometimes. But other times it's just people with fantastic personality that open themselves up, that are willing to really share what the police department is about. We know the research says that really what people are mostly interested in, because this is the way we survive, is what the pay is and what the and what the benefits are. That starts with it. But our motto, from the holistic point of view, is be the change. One of the things that's really good about this year, too, is that you, the council, and the mayor have given our officers a very good starting salary. So it's a great place to jump off of, especially when we're competing for candidates of color that might consider to go into another police department. There's not many that are as well compensated as ours. So we're already in a position to succeed there. I think that our approach this time is going to be identifying candidates that are really, really interested, trying to convince others that are interested. Officers are setting up, as we speak, little groups and pods of people that might be interested where you can just start the conversation. I think this has to be a journey. I think this has to happen not just to say, oh, look at us. We got this many black applicants. We got this many Hispanic applicants. I think it has to be, what was the end result when people are walking across the stage and being sworn in? And the way that happens is we have to attach people, officers in the job, especially for traditionally underrepresented communities that may not have a family member who's a police officer or a friend who's a police officer, and walk that journey with them. The mayor is committed to $80,000 in pre-test tutorials, which is really big. And we added from the Yonkers police budget another $8,000. That's $88,000 to really get our kids as prepared as possible. You know, these tests are very repetitive. There's right now, just so everyone understands, there is a new format of the exam. The format was born from current black and Hispanic officers taking the test to see how they scored, to see if they scored differently. That was done at the New York State level. I think that's going to help us tremendously. I also think us being very, very proactive about this tutorial program is going to be good. I think the idea of walking the journey with people, saying that it can't just stop with just getting an application. It's got to be, call me if you have a question. Why did you not show up to the tutorial last night? Are you studying? Are you doing what you're supposed to do? All the things that we do with our kids, everything I would do with my own son if he wanted to be a police officer. You know, I think we need to be doing that with everybody and really creating this kind of real supportive environment where they have a personal person to go to, someone that they can connect with if they don't have a family member or a friend, where we can really help them walk the road. So that's kind of our goal. Right now, the last test, I'll just give you some numbers. We have 473 police officers, 67 sergeants, 42 lieutenants, 19 captains. And the city's population breaks down to 52% white, 38% Hispanic, 20% African American. The YPD workforce is approximately 78% white, 14% Hispanic, and 7% African American. And this also extends into the promotional ranks, so captains, lieutenants, and sergeants. There's 8 that are in the supervisory ranks, and 3 are African American. So clearly we have a lot of work to do. We think that this is going to be a much more successful program. Similar to getting the word out on community programs, I would ask all of you to be partners here. And when you have candidates and you have kids that have questions, send them to us, send them to me personally, send them to all kinds of people, the community affairs, the PBA. I know Keith Olson is offering scholarships to kids to take the exam. So we're going to do everything we possibly can. And we also have Yale studying how we do to see really what the winner was after the end. Like I said, I'm happy that we do recruitment. I'm happy that we get people to take the exam. The real success is, are we getting communities of color to get to the point where they're hired? So this is a journey that starts now, and it goes all the way until the exam. And even after the exam, when people get in those upper tiers, what's going to be helpful is now we have people that they're connected with to talk to them about what's the next step. You have to take a psychological. What is that all about? You have to take a medical. What is that about? There's a background check. What is that all about? So we're going to make sure that we go beginning to end, and we're really hopeful that this is going to work very well. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Yeah. Shanae, Councilman Williams.
Thank you. I don't have a question. I have a comment. I just want to say thank you to the commissioner for sharing all of that information and all of those details in the breakdown of the demographics within the city and the police department. And I think it's just so important to have a commissioner who gets it and understands the importance of having a force that is diversified and really reflects the community. And you said one thing that was very interesting. You said that there are Black officers that are currently on the force that will be taking this new, the new exam to see how they would score. Is that what you said?
No, they've already. So the way they planned it.
Oh, I misheard you then.
So they took
it already.
Black and Hispanic officers around the state, and they provided them all kinds of different exams to see how they scored well and way the exam was designed. So it's my understanding.
Do they have the results of that?
Well, I mean, I think the result is the exam. I don't know what the results were like, because I haven't seen the exam yet, but I do know that I think there's 7 sections to it. And this is the thing too I want to emphasize to people. You master those sections and you're golden, because, and this is where we really have to communicate with our applicants. If you can master a section, it doesn't matter how they change the words. The format is the same. So you go by those 7 sections and you keep on one after the other, knocking them down. And by the time you're over with it, you're in the game to get 100. And I think it's also important, and we'll talk to the kids about this, particularly with our tutorial, is that you have to self-diagnose. So you have to say, well, if there's 7 sections and there's 5 of them that I'm scoring consistently 95 and above, I don't have to focus on those. I have to go to the 2 that maybe I'm scoring 75% or 80%. So all these things are going to be, provided to our kids and our applicants.
Okay.
Yeah, the officers, Black and Hispanic officers all over the state took the test. They took a bunch of tests, and then there was a final test that I guess is going to be this test, where they responded well to the questions and they did well in the exam. Hope that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. I wish I could take the test just for fun to see how I would do, because I think it's interesting that that we have these standardized tests that Black people just. Why can't I'm too old to take the police test now. That's why.
It goes up to 34.
I never thought I'd be saying that. I was going to be young forever. But I think it's a really good initiative that they did that, and I look forward to learning more about that. So thank you for sharing that, Commissioner.
Yeah, I got to give a shout out to Community Affairs. They have taken this Sergeant Laura Yakubowski under Chief Monaco and Tom Ward, Captain Ward. LaShannon Hogue, ridiculously good. Alex Bess, like these, the entire Community Affairs really putting a lot of thought and heart and soul into this. And I think we're going to see really positive results.
And I got to say, as Commissioner said, over the past 8 years, the past 2 tests, the amount of applicants, even though that's not what gives us the final result, or if they score high enough that we can hire, but the amount of applicants and the interest in taking our exam, which reflects on the recruitment process, has been tremendous. I mean, last time in 2018, I think we got over 5,000 applicants. And in 2014, we got a high number. So the recruitment has been very, very strong.
And to Carlos's point, I think that in the last test, Hispanic applicants to take the test outpaced white applicants.
Yeah.
And I think, look, this is the recruitment thing has to be nuanced to who you're talking to. One size does not fit all. So it's important to make sure, like, for example, we're going to be setting up these little satellite meetings. So for the Mexican Chamber of Commerce has agreed to have like a Q&A session where I'm going to attend it. We're going to get the information out through the community, and we're just going to talk about the job, what it pays, what it entails, how it helps your community, and all these different things. But it's going to be this partnership with the community outreach groups to say, yeah, we'll host it. Alfonso Alvarez says that he'll let us use the upper room upstairs at his restaurant at Dos Marias. So we'll get up there, we'll talk about it, and hopefully we're going to be able to push out more awareness about how great this job is and how helpful it is to the residents and the police department itself by getting really good candidates that live in the community and reflect communities of color.
Commissioner, I wanted to agree on that. The tutorials is the way to go. The booklets, the taking the tests, learn to be a test taker. The books. I mean, and we can get these books out there, and just by practice testing, and like you said, if certain areas are strong in, then you attack the area you're not so strong in. But I think that's the answer, is to get the pool up, get the kids up into high margins, and it's it's rote. It's studying and just go and get those booklets and work on them. So, and that's something we can do in the schools. I think that's a great idea. Have something in the schools, and then yes, you got to get the kids interested. But I think if you get them interested, they can work with these books, these study guides, and really get a good mark in the test. So we really push that.
The entire format that we have for this test, and remember, these exams only occur every 4 years. It's unique. It's not. We've always done things over and over the same way, and we're looking to jump out of that space and really think out of the box. But that's where you all help us by reaching out to qualified candidates and people interested. Carmen Goldberg from the charter school, who was on the reform committee, probably has already sent me like 15 names. So here's a person who has identified 15 people, had conversations, and maybe she had a relationship and a level of trust, and she forwarded them to us. Now it's our job to make the sale. And then it's the candidate's job to put the time in to study and get themselves to the top of that list. The mayor, the $80,000 commitment, you probably won't see that amount of funding put in, and it really speaks to the mayor's goals on what he wants to do with this recruitment campaign. So I think that to Councilman Breen's point, we're going to put all these kids in a position to succeed, but they have to put the time in. Any other questions about that? Okay. So now we are down to the recommendations of the Police Reform Committee. There's 4.2. Oh, wait, we do 4.1 first?
Yes, we did.
Okay. No. We talked about the zone banding.
Oh, no, that's it.
That's 4.1. So they want to expand. The recommendation is to expand civil service banding zones for police entrance examination score. Police examinations are scored in accordance with New York State civil service law. I think the key here being New York State civil service law. I do not believe that any recommendations here can be changed at the local level. I don't believe that the council has the legislative power to move on this recommendation. I think this would have to be advocacy at the state level. Councilman Williams, is that accurate?
That's accurate. That's accurate. I actually currently have a resolution that we're introducing this week. The next rules that will address that. But yeah, we have to send it up to the state for them to change it.
Okay, just so the public watching understands, like this is not something that I can do, the mayor can do, or the council can do. This has to come from New York State civil service law change. The recommendation is to expand the zones, and they want to say that because what we're seeing is, in particular, candidates of color are getting to 85, but this is a job that is in such demand that we usually don't get to 85, which is why the commitment to the tutorial is so important, because we need to make sure that these kids are candidates, are applicants. I say kids because they're old enough to be my kid. Some of them, not the 34-year-olds, but some of the younger guys and girls. But the most important thing is to make sure that they have everything they need to score high, and that's going to solve the problem short term. Longer term, like I said, it's state level advocacy. Did you want to say something, Carlos, on that?
Just the fact that minorities have done way better in these type of exams, whether it's fire or police. So we know that we see a pool of minority applicants and African American applicants in particular that are in that 85 range. And when you're hiring 50, 55 a year in a good year, and you have so many in the 95s, 90, as the commissioner said, it's very difficult to get to the 85. And the difference between an 85 and a 90 is what? 2 questions? Maybe 3 questions? So the tutorial and anything in terms of supporting these candidates or these applicants to do better is a big step. Expanding the pool would be good in a more immediate sense. But we're so close right now that even without this expansion, I'm sure that you're going to see improvement. You're going to see the list that's a little bit more diverse in the higher scores. But naturally, if you do get this expansion, it would be a big help.
Any other questions about that? Okay. We are up to 4.2. So the recommendation by the Professional Standards Review Committee was to strengthen the residency requirement for a police officer candidate. Frankly, no one on the non-resident list, I think, at least in my 26 or 27 years, has ever been called. I don't think. I think there's some data here in the report that says that I don't think we've ever even gotten down to 75 zone in the resident list. So clearly, you really have to score well with the zones as they are now. So the recommendation is to extend that resident list. That we can do a short-term residency requirement, which, Carlos, if you can speak to that, I believe it's 3 months prior to taking the exam.
Yeah, right now it's 3 months prior to the date of exam. Yes, there's conversation to extend it so that we get candidates that have been in the city of Yonkers longer. We do get a lot of candidates who lived here for a long time, but there was a feeling by the committee that we should extend that.
Okay. Any thoughts on that?
Does that conflict with state civil service law, or is that a law is that a regulation we can have on our own?
We can do that on our own.
Minority Leader Bree, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Council President.
Thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Moran, I think that Minority Leader was going. That 3 months, was that an internal department timeline that was set?
Yeah, 3 months was set as part of the 1980 something consent decree or 70 something. It was put in as per consent decree.
Okay, so my question is two-part. Will it be a policy issue where the council will have to legislate for a longer residency requirement, or can it just be an internal decision made? And then number two is, the second part is what is the residency checkup? Like, is it just a statement or is there a verification? That's the better word. Okay. What's the residency verification, no matter what the time frame is?
I'll answer part one. Part one would be a proposal presented by the mayor to the Civil Service Commission, and the Civil Service Commission will vote on that. Number two is something that Commissioner Mueller can address. The background checks and that stuff.
So referring to the background check, we do a really extensive background check. But to be perfectly honest, we're not in someone's house watching them come home from work every day doing a surveillance. You can develop a paper trail with residency. You can. You can get all your bills sent to a place. You can do. Now, we hope that people don't do that. But I just want the council to understand the limitations of the Yonkers Police Department in terms of vetting. We can do lots of stuff. We can do background checks. We can do criminal histories. We can do Department of Motor Vehicle checks. We do home visits and things like that. So we're doing the best we can with that. But yes, Council President Cater, yeah, it's a very extensive background.
No, and just to be clear, I wasn't talking about the background aspect of it because, there is that policy. It was more of the residency component. Many times, many members of our department, it almost is like life starts in Yonkers, and then everyone, moves out as they, marry and stuff. But, what I've personally seen is, people live in northern Westchester or in different counties, but still have family ties to Yonkers, and they'll use their parents' address, for example. So that's where that question spurned from, and so it wasn't the background check; it's more of the residency verification component. And I do recognize you can't have a stakeout, in front of every applicant's house, but I just wanted to see if that was vetted.
But yeah, it's part of the background check too. But the residency requirement, really, what we're talking here is the ones in regards to the people that are applying or the people that we're going to select. If you're talking about police officers that are on the force now, that's a different matter. So,
of course, yes, Commissioner Moran, I'm talking about any potential candidate for the academy. We're talking about not current force applicants to come on the force. Absolutely.
So the vetting is quite extensive, from what I know.
Thank you so much, both commissioners, Moran and Commissioner Mueller. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I follow up on that? 1 second, Anthony. I'm sorry. Can I follow up on that? So there's a 3-month residency required. When they fill out the application, do they ask them how long they've lived in Yonkers, or you just have to have 3 months? I mean, and when the test results are in, do you know how many 3-monthers did well? How many with a 3-month resident did well compared to people that said they lived here for 6, 7, 8, 9 their whole life? I mean, can you delve into that information, or it's not? It's just you live in Yonkers, yes or no?
No. That's an extensive background, Councilman Breen. We have kicked people off the residency list for not, where we can definitively disprove that they don't live in Yonkers. It has to go through the Civil Service Commission. We have to basically make a case and prove to the Civil Service Commission why they don't belong on the residency list, and then they make a decision. But people have been removed from that list based on, I wouldn't say fraudulent residency, whatever you want to say.
And I want to say that, yes, there is a question in regards to if you've been living in Yonkers for more than 3 months. Yes. And I'll get back to you, but pretty sure there is no, have you been living 6 months, a year? So there's no way I can really tell you that the ones that have lived there a year or 2 years or 10 years or 6 months are scoring differently.
Is that something we can consider, just the length of residency, not how they did on the test, but on the application, length of residency, or how long have you lived in? I mean, is that something we can put on the application?
You know what? Let me review it. That's a very good question. I will review that and get back to you.
And the other thing is, when you get to commission, we get to finally hiring 10 people, and there's 12 people, and one of them lived in Yonkers for 3 months, and one of them lived in Yonkers for 15 years. Can that be, I mean, if they're exactly the same person, can that be a determining factor?
I don't know if it's per civil service, treating everybody fairly and equally, civil service law, that it's based on merit, based on a score. So at this point right now, I don't know if you can reject somebody because they once been, or you can hire somebody over somebody else because they've been living in Yonkers longer. I would say no, but I would find that out. I will find that out and let you know.
It just addresses the issue. One way to address this issue of residency is just to scrutinize it a little. My opinion, anyway. Thank you. Councilman Ranty. Go ahead, Councilman Ranty.
I have a little button issue there. Okay, so it's kind of what you're saying, Chairman, is so I want to just rephrase it in a little different. If you had to if you had to, I don't know if you have the stats or it's something that you have to take a stab at, in a given class, would the applicants that that are chosen are the percentage Yonkers residents, are they longtime Yonkers residents versus a short-term Yonkers residents? Maybe we got to put the Yonkers history test on there as part of the exam or something, rather to say that if you know who was the mayor 3 terms ago or something like that, just so we get some real history out of it. But I'm just curious: are we hiring more Yonkers longtime residents because they qualify? Obviously, the terminology I think that the chairman was saying was that kind of like, can we pick that one over the other? It's not fair with the civil service. But if their scores are good, I mean, are we hiring more Yonkers? That's what I'm interested in.
Councilman Moranti, to your question, John Spencer was the mayor 3 terms ago, and prior to him was Terrence Zaleski. So, but yes,
you're hired.
To your point, it's hard because what you're talking about, and I think Carlos touched on this, is the rules right now say 3 months prior. Doesn't say you get an extra 2 points for being 10 years, or extra for being 20 years. So I think it's a difficult thing to do. Right now, the rules are the rules. So the way to address this is to look at the rules. All things being equal, yeah, I mean, like if we're picking people from the same zone, yeah, we can take one over the other. That's one idea. But also keep in mind, too, even if a guy lived here their entire life, if they're not in that zone, we can never go to them before the person who might have moved here 3 months. And that's also civil service law. So this is kind of an intertwined problem, but I think you guys are coming up with some pretty good solutions.
Councilwoman Williams.
It's fair. It's just fair. It's just a fair situation. That I mean, I'm not again. If they qualify, listen, I'm I'm totally not in favor, especially at the next point, of kind of curving the grade. But the Yonkers residents, I'm just curious. I would hope that at a percentage wise, we can't say, the people that we're hiring, if I'm not understanding here, they're qualifying, but not necessarily long-time Yonkers residents. And I would hope that the Yonkers residents, if they are in Yonkers residents, in a class of say 20, if at least 10 to 15 are not long-time Yonkers residents, then we've got a problem, because they should be passing this test, even though it has nothing to do with the history of the city. They should be passing this test and making it onto the force. But obviously, rules are rules. But I just think that Yonkers residents, they should be. There's no reason why they shouldn't be passing the tests with 95 and hundreds.
Right.
Thank you, Councilman Moranti. Councilwoman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think it's important for me to let the record show that for this one time, I completely 100% agree with Anthony Morante and Mike Reed, 100%. So no, I agree. I think it's very important. I think what they're trying to say is, but if they're in the same zone, if they are completely equal in their scores on every level, right? So there's no they're literally neck and neck. And there's one person who was born and raised in Yonkers versus one person who moved to Yonkers 3 months before the exam. I think it's important and incumbent on us as a city to give preference to that Yonkers born and raised residents, right? I think that's what everyone is kind of saying. And I don't think that will, violate civil service law, because I know that the administration has the capability of looking at that zone. If there's only 10 spots and there's, 12 people gunning for those 10 spots, the administration have that leeway within that zone to pick those 10 people. If it comes down to somebody that's neck and neck, they can make that determination. And one of the factors to look at should be that long-time residency requirement. That's all I want to say.
I don't know if it's a criteria or a factor right now.
It's not, Carlos, but if we were to do it,
it should be.
If we were to do it, we'd have to look at that. We'd have to look to Councilwoman Williams' point. We'd have to kind of pull out a timeline of everyone in the zone and say, you were here 3 months ago. You've been here your whole life. So it can be done.
Right.
So that'd be a Matt Gallagher.
It seems a little bit messed up for elected officials to be doing this and saying this, but we're really fighting for Yonkers people because we care about them. We know that it's been challenging for a lot of Yonkers residents to get jobs here because we hear them tell us this over and over. And we really just want to advocate for that, What they do once they come onto the force, we know that they can leave in the January in Westchester or wherever they want to live in another state. That's fine. We can't do anything about that. But for the people who are invested in Yonkers, we should give them preference, I think. I'm done.
Yep. I will follow up with Corporation Council and see what their thought is on this.
Okay, so we are now to 4.4, establish a police examination prep course in Yonkers high schools. I think that I've already explained this as far as how aggressive we're being with trying to get the prep course as available as possible to our kids. I know that a number of Yonkers Force kids are I think we've done a good job with this. I would also say that nothing precludes any outside organization to set up additional prep courses. The Yonkers Guardians, the Westchester Hispanics and Law Enforcement, really any other organization to also help augment what we're doing in the city. I think, and I'd say it to my kids all the time, more studying usually doesn't hurt. So I think that's another opportunity there, that if we could have our community groups reach out and assist, if there are teachers in the community that want to give up their time and some of our community groups want to provide something, an ancillary resource to additional testing, I think that would help too. We certainly would, help, make that happen. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay. So now we are at 4.5. So develop a long-term police recruitment strategy for the Black community. The police review committee has, identified that, there's only 12% of people self-reported for the last test in 2017 as being black, as opposed to 43% in 2017 that were Hispanic. So it's 5% higher than the city's overall Hispanic population of 38%. So Hispanic candidates obviously were over even the percentages that are existing in Yonkers right now, and it is not so with the African American community. This is a long-term solution. This is something that is a great recommendation because clearly, based on those numbers, and those numbers don't lie, the data is the data, we haven't been able to make inroads with the black community as far as candidates and police recruits. So I think the long-term solution is all the programs we're doing now and more. It's a youth police initiative. It's going into the schools. It's the police cadet program. It's the Yonkers Force. It's all of these outreach programs where we're building relationships before, well before an exam. And I think that's what, President Olson always says, and I say the same thing. Like, we love the Yonkers Force. We're glad they're a great football team, but like the real great success will be when one of those guys who played football for the Yonkers Force walks across the stage and we pin a Yonkers police shield on them, and that's what we're striving for. So they, the police review committee, the police reform committee has kind of identified, the different reasons why poor perception of police and ineffective marketing and outreach by the YPD. We need help with this. We need more help. We need to get, buy-in from our black officers and just even our community-oriented officers that really are great communicators, very personable, and just, having conversations and contacts with people all the time. Like, recruitment should not be 6 months before the exam or a year before the exam. Recruitment has to happen all the time. And then you reap the benefits of that every 4 years when the exam comes up. So we're looking for, and I think this is a problem nationally, we're looking for ways to help us increase diversity in police departments. And obviously it starts with recruitment. It starts with good, solid test taking where the scores are high. So the more, again, this is another example where you guys can help me. You can help the Yonkers Police Department, help us with marketing, help us come up with strategies and initiatives where we can really, extend our hand to our African American community and say, hey, listen, this is a great job. You're going to be paid well, compensated well, and you're really going to do a service to your community. Because, like I say all the time, I tell the new cops, you have multiple opportunities every single day to make a friend. And making those friends is what's going to get us where we need to be, where young African American candidates will say, I want to be a cop based on interaction as opposed to having a negative interaction and saying, I want nothing to do with those guys. So it is a long-term strategy. I'm looking for help with it. We're all open to any suggestions and recommendations, but it is happening now. Like I said, with the Yonkers Force Cadet Program, YPI, the BRIC program, all of these things where kids of color in the Yonkers community never really sat down with a police officer in a comfortable environment. We're grateful for, like, the YWCA. They supplied space for us. Those conversations really start things off on the right foot, and you build from there. But recruiting is an every day, all day, every year, all year effort. Any questions about that? Okay, so we now are to the final focus area, which is focus area 8, mental health support for the police. This is very important. One of the things we've done is that's why Autumn Edwards is such a rock star in our job. Her full-time job is to really take care of the officers because, like everybody else in life, there's always drama in everybody's life. And I don't think anybody's going to raise their hand and say, I have no drama. I certainly can't. Whether it be, a family member who's sick or alcoholism or addiction or, any kind of problem, depression and mental health issues, the cops need it as much as anybody and sometimes more. We already have a very robust peer support program where our officers are trained. We have a number of officers who volunteer, not paid for it. They're trained to go out and talk to cops. So what does this mean? It could mean if a cop is having a problem, they would reach out to him. It could be a very specific incident. Obviously, I know you guys all know, because you're very supportive of police officers in general, like the horror that these officers witness sometimes. It's hard to unlook that. And we never did this when I was a young police officer. I started my career in 1992. And there was no such thing as going to see a therapist or going to someone who could provide, therapy or mental health. It was just either nothing, toughen it up, or drink. And how'd that work out? It didn't work out well. So I think, number one, we're becoming more progressive in this area, and our officers are more willing to accept being younger, and just it's mental health issues are no longer stigmatized the way they were 30 years ago. So, but they go through a lot, and we want to just, engage them constantly. And that's what the magic of what Autumn Edwards does is she's constantly, working with people. There's a million different stories that she probably goes to. We always say her office is the diner, because so many of her interactions for this particular mental health support thing happens at a diner over coffee, and follow-ups and all kinds of visits, people's houses. And, we can always be better at it. We're constantly sending her to health and wellness initiatives to learn what other police departments are doing, how they're doing it. Officer suicides are up. And, we need to really address this. It's been very hard. But I think we're on the right track, but we can always do better. So we need to really be mindful of, really proactively just communicating. This was the recommendation of the review committee, the reform committee. Keep saying review. You guys are the review. We're the reform. To, kind of make sure everybody's in a good place mentally. Corazon Pineda, Isaac.
Sorry, I couldn't find my cursor. My question is, what after a traumatic occurrence or incident, what is the steps that are taking for an officer with regards to their mental health and stability?
So that's the peer support group. So peer support is trained to reach out to those officers. I remember, these incidents happen not every day, but they happen often enough, and you'll carry it with the rest of your career. I remember there was a situation in the 4th Precinct where a mailman killed his entire family and his dog. And then he killed himself. And, we can't just think about the officers responding. You have to think about, I'll never forget, I was talking to a crime scene unit detective who said, I had to spend the last 3 hours in this little girl's room with all her little girl things on the wall, looking at this child. And you can imagine the trauma that PTSD that really affects that officer, not for a couple of days, but for life. So to your question, that's what peer support is about. That's the first step, to reach out and say, I'm here. I want to listen to what you have to say. I'm here to help you. And then based on the officer's responses, are you okay? The peer committee is really set up to do that first interaction to your question about a traumatic event. And from there, they're also trained to recognize and refer. So is the officer okay? Is the officer kind of okay? Is the officer really messed up? And the next steps are, well, maybe we need to take you to a medical professional. Maybe you need to go to therapy for a while. And so we're always trying to think about ways to do that. But we've learned that the best way to do it is to get after it as soon as it happens. And that's kind of that rapid deployment of the peer support team. I hope that answers the question.
It does a little bit. Are there any specific incidents that trigger a mandatory, conversation with a psychologist, psychiatrist, that kind of thing? Anything that triggers that you have to do it?
That is on a case-by-case basis, but we do that depending on the case, where we may say, we're going to, the officer, for whatever reason, was placed off duty. We would like the officer to just sit down and talk with a mental health professional to see where they're at, to see if they're okay to come back. It might be an officer-involved shooting. Not that we've had any, but, things like that. That happens more nationally. So, yes, there are, steps that we take depending on the situation to make sure that when the officer does come back after a traumatic incident, that they're in the right place.
Thank you. And then it actually doesn't necessarily go with a traumatic incident, but also What support services are there for? Is it also through peer? For, let's say, like an officer who's struggling maybe with addiction or something, whereas, there could be some help offered to help them combat that without them maybe having to lose, their job.
That's Autumn's sole, well, she has many responsibilities, but that's one of her primary responsibilities. So she's a parallel track to the department, and she operates under the kind of auspices of, unless someone's in danger of hurting themselves or hurting the other, she has confidentiality. And, this is a relatively new program, probably 2 or 3 years old. She is a magnificent human being. I can't say enough about her and what she's done for our officers, but it takes time for the officers to recognize that they can trust her and trust the department. And she's been very helpful with that. And then on top of that, what we're seeing now more and more, again, I don't get, a lot of the details because of the confidentiality aspect of it, but we're also seeing fellow officers who are concerned, feeling comfortable enough to call Autumn and say, hey, I'm worried about this officer or that officer. We need to really kind of look at the way the rest of the world has gone, is that this isn't ratting on someone. This isn't telling on someone. This is practicing empathy. This is recognizing that, officers are people too, and they go through a lot, and they go through it every day, all day. We really need to understand that we have to be very mindful of that, because at the end of the day, that's going to affect how they're dealing with the public, how they're treating the public. And that goes back to the procedural justice point. Maybe it's a little more benign, but I'll still say it. Does the Yonkers Police Department, do our officers feel like we care for them, that we're mindful of them, that we think about them, that we value about them, that we love them? And if we do, and that's kind of a message that is kind of universal, they're going to do that with the community. So it's important on a number of fronts. But that's a good question.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Williams.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to both you, Commissioner Mueller and Commissioner Moran, for just being here for the past couple hours and answering all of our questions and going through the recommendations of the committee. I just have one last question about the overall process of all of these recommendations. So there are a lot of recommendations there. Some of them are things that the police department is already doing. Some of them they can strengthen a little bit. I think a lot of stuff that you guys can easily implement on your own within the department. And then there are some that require more attention, that has to go through other agencies, go up to the state, and so on and so forth. And so my question is, after this gets submitted to the governor, or maybe not even after, but what is the timeline for all of these recommendations to actually go into effect and get implemented? Are we looking at, did the committee look at that, or is there a time frame for that? Are we waiting for the governor to let us know what that may be, or do we have an idea? Because there's a lot of good information here that has to happen. So I'm kind of trying to figure out when that will happen, when all of these things will happen.
I think it's Councilwoman Williams, it's on a case-by-case basis, right? So it's easy for us to immediately put up our policy and procedures on our website. Done. We can do that. And we will after it gets voted on and it's accepted. That can be done in a day. You guys having to advocate, if you choose to do so based on the committee's recommendations, you have to advocate to New York State Civil Service. You can tell me that's probably a longer process. And it's a process that does not really necessarily involve the police department. Those are elected officials like yourself. Then there's the other aspect of it. The other bucket is money. If we want to do a 24-hour mental health team that goes and responds to non-criminal, non-violent, non-threatening incidents with people that are suffering, that are in emotional crisis, what is that going to cost? Is the county willing to commit those resources to Yonkers? Can they do it for Yonkers and then not do it for New Rochelle? I don't know the answer to that. So there's a lot of interconnected parts here. What I can tell you with assurance is the things that the Yonkers Police Department can do, the mayor is committed to doing, and we will do it, and we'll do it as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
Council President Cater.
Thank you, Commissioner. when you were talking about following up on Majority Leader's question, and you were talking about the support services that the officers are given, it kind of reminds you that post-traumatic stress that you mentioned. So you never forget the trauma that you see or experience. You kind of learn how to cope and live with it. And I remember when I was overseas in war zones, they gave support for families also. So I guess I'm asking, there's clearly a support system for the officers. Is that support system offered to spouses and families? Because many times they're the ones that suffer along with that individual.
We are, but we can always do better. I think, Council President Cater, this is something we need to do better, and we're starting to do that already. So, for example, we've identified through some past incidences that people that are out on long-term disability need to be connected with.
Council President, your mic, please.
Councilman Morant, if you tell me to be quiet, absolutely.
Commissioner Moran, could you turn your thing off? Okay, you good? I don't think I hear any feedback anymore. I always think about Joe DiMaggio when this comes on.
It's always the Council President's fault.
Yes. I'll leave that with you guys. But to your question, Council President, yes, we're starting to expand out, and this is, again, and I can't say enough about Autumn Edwards and her team. We're trying to be mindful of all of these things because it does extend out to families. It does extend out when you're home and you're not at work for a long time. So we are trying to do this. A lot of it is we recognize we have a deficiency. I think it's no secret that we're still looking for Sergeant Burns, and we want to make sure that his family is okay. We want to think about what put him in this situation to possibly do what he may have done. And was there anything that we could have done on the YPD side to counteract this? You're never going to be 100% on this, but I think that there are definitely lessons that we can learn, and we will. And there are actionable steps that we can put together to make sure that we have done everything we possibly can to make sure that, to your point, families have support, people that are out long-term disabled have support, and all the great work that Autumn's already doing with her team.
And Council President, just to add, aside from what the police department support and the great work that Autumn does, we do have an EAP program that provides support, whether it's mental health issues, issues with daily living with your families, elder issues in your families. We have a program in the city that's an EAP program that's connected to the county. So we have a contract with them, and they provide services that will help our employees deal with situations that they need specialized help with.
That's a great point. And also the thing.
Thank you, Commissioner Moran. Thank you, Commissioner Mueller, on those both of those.
Just to jump off that too, that's a great point about EAP for the county level, because one of the things that Autumn does, her methodology is when it becomes a situation that she can't handle and it's bigger than what her capabilities are, that's when she has all these other networks to kind of raise the game, where it might be a psychiatrist, it might be a therapist, it might be something else. So she not only does she, kind of set it up, but she's the person who knows where to send someone who needs additional support.
All right. Any more questions? Councilman Morante.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you, Commissioner. I think you've topped your interview time. So your interview, I think, was like 2 hours and 20 minutes. You're at 2 hours and 30 minutes now. But,
Councilman, one thing. I was born for the filibuster. Born for it. So if you want to go another 5 hours, we can.
You're in a more comfortable chair, and you have probably plenty of water and beverages hanging around your desk. So again, I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for this. It was very good. My comments on the thing, again, I'm going to just summarize it, that the fact that, first of all, I think most of us agree that the Yonkers Police Department, based on, following all these Department of Justice rules and everything, have done a great job. I think we have a great department. Are there a few bad incidents that have occurred? Unfortunately, I think the most important parts of this report were the last two, because police They bleed, and they have feelings like most of us at certain times, and you've got to control them because obviously that creates issues. So I think that those two probably belong at the top of this list versus at the bottom of the list, because that is the thing that creates the problems. Because I would hope that when there is an incident, I think our guys are not discriminatory people. They just might be the victims of bad timing emotionally. That's my take on the whole thing. As far as the whole report for the chair and for the committee members, which I am not part of this committee, I guess, but my 2 cents on this is that it's a good report in total. If I had the opportunity to do a line item veto of certain things, I would not put some of the certain things inside here. So I guess we have to accept this resolution as a whole. So I think and then the 2 other things that were mentioned, as of course Councilwoman Williams will always say to me, is it's all about money to you, Councilman Moranti. And yeah, and it is about money. And some of the things like the schools and everything, there is a money factor which is not factored into this, and there is a delegation of responsibility on this, because the parts about mental illness and homelessness and the whole is a lot to do with the county. So there's no question about it. The county, why some of your interactions have to be with, and that's some of the police that I do know. They're dealing more and more with mental health issues. So that means these folks need to be addressed more from the county level. But again, it's a complicated formula. No one's going to deny that. The only thing that I agree with the resolution that went out here, it says it's got fiscal implications, and it says none. And that's absolutely incorrect. This has fiscal implications if you want to implement this. So I guess if we have to accept it as a whole, and I am not a member of the committee, but when it does come down, I mean, I guess I would say that we have to accept it. Agreeing to what you said, Commissioner, that we have to look at this on a case by case, on a line by line issue, and deal with the items. But there is a fiscal impact on this to make this work efficiently and effectively. So I thank you. I will eventually, support it as a whole. But as I said, out of the 22 items, I would probably veto 4 of them, or at least adjust them. So that's my 2 cents, Chairman. I just wanted to give that synopsis, and I hope that we can move this forward.
Thank you, Councilman Moranti. Is anyone else? Okay, I just want to remind everyone, these are recommendations, and we're not voting to implement them. They are recommendations. Anthony stole my job interview joke, because your job interview was the longest job interview. Apparently, whenever we get you in a room, we don't let you go. Are you getting overtime?
That wasn't my fault. That was your guys' fault.
Are you getting overtime for this?
I don't get any overtime.
Okay, I'm just checking. Cheap joke. I think we had to address this issue. We had to give it all our effort because we don't want to sell short our constituents. This is a very, very important issue. I think we've given it a real good looking over. I think we've had a lot of questions. I think everyone's satisfied. I want to move this to rules. So if the committees are there, can we move this to rules? Can I get everyone in favor of moving it to rules? Fine. We will move it to rules.
Our final item, Mr. President, item number 9, it's a resolution. It's concerning police reform.
As this council is aware, back in the summer, the governor issued a mandate for all cities and municipalities that had a police department to compile a reform board. And Yonkers was no different than any other municipality with a police district. And the mayor appointed a board. The board met. There was a lot of public conversation. And a few weeks ago, their final report was made public. There was a public comment period, and I know that those comments were shared with the council. It's incumbent upon us that we vote on this and that it gets sent up to Albany. It's important, though we're talking about the procedural history and what's being done, it's important to talk about the contents of the report. While there were 22 recommendations, some of them required funding. Some of them appeared to be policy changes. It's important that once we vote on this, it gets signed and it goes up, that we continue to revisit police reform. It's important that we continue not just to say community policing, but that we are always using best practices and making sure that we truly have a community police department. During the summer, the world saw the social justice and civil unrest, from racism and certain brutalities. It's important that particularly our most marginalized and in our Black and Brown communities know that this council hears their concerns, hears their fears, and anything that's within our power will be heard, and we'll try to implement any changes that we can at the local level. I'll open up the floor if there's any questions or comments concerning this resolution. Minority Leader Breen.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. And I would like to commend our corporate our attorneys who made a slight change to this as I requested, and I'm looking forward to a 7-0 vote on this. I commend the committee for their work. I commend the Yonkers Police for getting this committee together and working on this. I think we're ahead of the curve in Yonkers. We're doing a lot of this stuff already. I know there's always room for improvement, but this is an important aspect of the police department, working with the community. So I'm happy to support this tonight, send this to Albany, and get on with the police business of Yonkers, and especially working with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Minority Leader Breen. Are there any other questions or comments? Councilwoman Diaz.
I just want to start by saying that I sat on the police committee reform, and I'm proud to say that I'm happy with the outcome of the report. And I hope that the entire city council would adopt it 7-0. And I want to thank the mayor for actually appointing me to the board as well. Me being a new council person, this actually enhanced my working with the police department. I've always worked with the police in the community, but this also enhanced that. That being said, because I was able to voice my concerns or any issues that the community had that they felt as if needed to be addressed. And we all know one of the issues was that they wanted the police department to reflect the community that they serve. And I'm proud to say that there was money donated and found, so that way minorities will be able to take the test and have a tutorial that'll prepare them when they go and take the test. And the person that they have appointed to do this is guaranteed to raise test scores. So I'm anxious to see the outcome of this whole, the classes. The classes will be beginning soon. They've already had their first Zoom meeting, so the police department have already introduced themselves into the people that will be taking the tutorials. And I just want to say Commissioner Mueller also worked closely with me on this to ensure that whatever concerns or issues the community had, that they were addressed. And with that being said, I just hope that we can adopt this 7-0 so we can start moving Yonkers forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Diaz. Councilwoman Williams.
Thank you. First, let me just commend the entire 25 or 20 something community members and police officers and everyone that was involved in putting this report together. I think it's great that we were able to comply with the governor's executive order and get this done before the April deadline. But I want to just let the record reflect that I 100% care less about the money that we might be getting from the state, but more about getting actual police reform done in the city of Yonkers. I know that we have the body cameras and they're continuing to be rolled out. More and more officers are getting our cameras, and I thank the mayor for his efforts in that. But there's so much more that we need to do aside from the body cameras. We still need to do the community review board. We still need to, there's a lot of recommendations in that report, and I will be making sure that I pay very close attention to make sure that these things are facilitated over the next few months. I will be voting in support of this, and I do congratulate our commissioner and our mayor and everyone that was able to make this happen. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman Williams. Are there any other questions or comments? Councilman Rubo.
Thank you, Council President. Just about a week or so ago, we sat with Commissioner Mueller, who explained each of the points identified in this document, what his thoughts were, how they could be implemented, what the impact could be. And the members of the police department, especially Chief Campanini, who was served on this board, I think that their participation, along with the participation of our community, and of course, thank you, Councilwoman Diaz, for serving and spending your time on this. It's presented a document that I think has taken the community's input, the input of police professionals, and has taken something that we can now present to the state. Unlike, I say unlike many municipalities across the state of New York, or even across this country, over the last decade, we have made so many strides. We have made so many changes in how we do things here in the city of Yonkers. As many people out there know, we had the Department of Justice here in the city of Yonkers reviewing our practices, reviewing our policies. And we've made so many changes and so many advancements. I think it's great now for all involved to now have body-worn cameras on our police officers. As the council just heard not so long ago, it's more or less been rolled out to the entire department for all shifts, which I think is something fantastic that we should celebrate for all. I certainly stand behind our police department, and I look forward to seeing what the response from the state of New York is to the recommendations from this great committee. So thank you again to all those involved.
Thank you, Councilman Rubo. Any other questions or comments? I do not see any. We'll close the floor and we'll bring this matter to a vote. All members by name. What are those kids doing upstairs?
Adopted 7-0. We have no further business, Mr. President.